Hi, this is Stephan Kammerer from SK Mouthpieces in New York City. I have this Otto Link STM Florida, no USA, up for refacing, and it needs a new bite plate. You can see that the bite plate has been bit through. And I'm just going to do an assessment of this mouthpiece before I get to work on it. One of the issues you can see here is that the tip rail is really wide. It's actually almost 2 millimeters wide in the middle here, and then the other thing is that the baffle has this high point right behind the tip rail here. It's a very common problem, but it really impacts the way that the mouthpiece plays a lot. So if you scrape a thin needle file across right here, you should not be able to see this line behind it. It should be scooting back and forth right behind on the inside of the tip rail. So the tip rail is too wide and the baffle is too high here, which basically works as if the tip rail was like 4 millimeters wide. So it's causes resistance, and this type of thing with the baffle can cause a lot of high, shrill overtones in the sound that may turn into a squeak or a squeal. Or maybe it's just like this unpleasant, like high-pitched whistle behind everything. So I'm going to look at the facing as well. So the tip opening is 104, and it's marked as a 7-star. So that's pretty close to where it should be. I suspect that this mouthpiece has been worked on because this vintage here would normally have a cleaner tip rail and a more narrow tip rail. They did have different people hand finish the mouthpieces back in the 60s when this was made, but I haven't seen this on an original piece. It may also be wear over time. Metal mouthpieces wear over time as well. Let's have a look at the facing. Okay, so I'm going to, these numbers here are more or less what's on the mouthpiece. The facing is off quite a bit, and the table is also pretty rough. So it's hard to get a really clean reading, but it's good enough for me to get a sense of what this is. So a mouthpiece of this kind, 7-star, mostly would come with a 48 length facing if the first feeler gauge is 0.0015 in thickness. I'm probably going to put a 50 length facing on it. But the first facing I'm going to put down here is going to be the 48 length facing that is what you would see on a mouthpiece like this, and then we'll compare. So the first number would be 48, 46. So these are the numbers. This is the layout that is closest to what you would see on a mouthpiece like this. They would have varied from mouthpiece to mouthpiece back then as well. They're not like all exactly the same, but this is like a really good facing of that type for a mouthpiece like this. So I'm going to write down the 50 length facing here, so you can see, and the 50 length facing is more similar to what you would find on a hard rubber Otto Link from that era. And it works really well on the metal mouthpieces as well. This is the 48 length, and this is the 50 length down here. So if you look at it, if you compare with the 48 length facing, you can see that everything here is longer, 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 all the way down. Everything is longer. So what that means is so let's compare it to the 50 length as well. So you can see that it's a hair longer on the 50 number as well. The 48 number is or what would be 48 for functional facing is actually almost 50. That means that the curve starts from the plane of the table and drops off like really drastically to begin with. So that means that there's a lack of support in the early part of the facing, and that already there causes a problem. So that is one of those things that causes the mouthpiece to drag down in pitch, and it's a mouthpiece that'll tire you out when you play it, because you're gonna have to hold pitch with your chops rather than the mouthpiece holding it for you, which it should. So you can see that this is too long, 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 bump all the way out until here. At this point here, it starts being the same as what it would be for a 50 length facing, but all these points here are too open on it, which like gives it no support in the low end. The low end is going to be too open and uncontrollable. Now, an interesting thing here is that it goes back to being longer, and then suddenly here it starts being shorter. So the way that you can look at a facing like this, that if it's the more open a facing is, the darker it is, or the more it pronounces the low particles in the sound, and the higher it is, the more pronounced is the higher particles in the sound. So it means that you have a mouthpiece that in the low range of the horn, like really pronounces the low end, and in the higher end of the horn, it starts pronouncing the higher particles in the sound, and that continues here with this number. This number is shorter, and then this is the same here, and now this is shorter, and this is shorter by a little bit. So that is highly problematic, because that is closer to what it would be like for 48 length facing, but it's longer than it would be on a 48 length facing, but shorter than it would be on a 50 length facing. That makes it a really complicated and difficult mouthpiece to play. That, in addition to the higher baffle right here, will have it be very uncontrollable. Like the low end is too open, too wide, too wobbly. It'll be pulling down in pitch, and at the same time it'll have some of that whistly high end coming through into playing as well. Not great. The good news is that this mouthpiece can be refaced, and I'll reface it in another video. I'm also going to put a new bite plate on it, because this, as you can see, is bitten through all together, which is actually really interesting, because that is consistent with what this facing looks like. When the facing looks like this, the only way that you can control it is by biting hard on it. So, and there you go. It's bitten through it. And I'm going to take this off. And you can see whoever bit this mouthpiece bit right into the metal here. So that's the impact of a facing that looks like that.